Okay, well, we'll get started just because we've got quite a bit to get through. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Gomez. I'm the recovery coordinator here at the San Juan County Economic Development Council. And today we've got our very special guests, Janine Sacco and Mark Costello from the Small Business Association. We're going to walk us through the latest and greatest update on the SBA programs that are available to small business for pandemic relief. And this presentation is being recorded. So we will make this recording available on our website later this afternoon for folks that weren't able to be here live. This slide deck will also be available on our website. The link that you went to on our website to sign up for this event is where this stuff will all be parked later today once we can get it uploaded. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Janine or Mark, who would like to go first, actually.
Hey, why don't I go ahead, John, and kind of set the table for Jamie to dive into the presentation.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here talking to you and your membership. We're here again at a really interesting time as far as our country and economy and this crisis that we've been working through with the COVID situation. And I think, as most people know, we went through a pretty significant rollout of some programs back many months ago now, back in March and April of last year, and sort of the key components of that were SBA's Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Now, after several months of sort of contemplation and negotiation, that we have a new stimulus package. The Economic Aid Act is what we're referring to it as. It's maybe not quite of the magnitude as those first ones. I think the first bill was something like $2.3 billion. I think this one is something in the range of $950 billion, but you know, that's still a significant amount of money. And the dollars are being directed toward a number of different programs, several of which are going to be run through SBA again. And so what we wanted to do today is give you guys an opportunity to just hear a little more than an overview, a fairly detailed coverage of what we know about these programs, with a pretty big emphasis on the Paycheck Protection Program. So what you're going to find is there is a new iteration of the PPP that is part of this legislation, and in fact, it actually kind of started rolling out, maybe trickling out is probably a better word, this week, and it is going to be available in earnest next week. And so like any of this stuff, as I was maybe talking a little bit beforehand, we maybe don't have all of the guidance, all of the regulations, all of the procedures, all of the forms yet, but they will be coming. And so our objective today is to share what we do know about these programs, so that folks can kind of think about whether or not, number one, they want to pursue those resources, whether it be the PPP or something else, and then number two, kind of how they can start to prepare for that in terms of documentation and things of that nature. So this is sort of a bit of a dump of what we know to be factual. And so with that in mind, the other thing I just wanted to make sure, and this is sort of, I start to sound like a broken record, but I want to make sure that folks are getting accurate, timely, factual information on these SBA programs. And in order to do that, one of the ways that we want to try to suggest anyway is to direct folks to the SBA website. If you go to sba.gov /updates and you put in your email address, you are going to receive the whatever public facing communication SBA puts out on these programs as they continue to develop and evolve. That would be an easy way to kind of make sure you're dialed in and kept in the loop. The other approach would be to just simply go to the SBA website /coronavirus, and that will take you actually to the array of programs that are out there, including the Paycheck Protection Program and the current rules around it, including the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the approach to accessing that. So there's a lot of stuff there. You're going to find, I think, that there's some interesting new components to this legislation. Interesting in that, number one, I think that we have improved the PPP, and there are going to be some maybe more effective outcomes there as far as how folks can use the money, and in fact, some of the different industries that are going to be targeted with the PPP make a lot of sense. Janie's going to go into that a little bit. There are also some things that are just going to make things a little bit easier. Number one, if you have an existing PPP loan, you're going to find there's going to be a greater opportunity for a streamlined forgiveness for loans, in fact, up to 150,000. It's going to be ultimately a one-pager where we're going to rely on certifications from a borrower to sort of drive that SBA forgiveness process. And I think ultimately that's going to save a tremendous amount of effort and administrative resources on the part of both the small businesses and the lending community. There's another program that Janie, I believe, is going to touch on that's also certainly I think it's one of the more interesting features of this legislation, and it's the result of, I think, a tremendous amount of communication and negotiation by the different industries involved. But we have something that's we're calling the Shuttered Venues grant program, and this is going to actually provide grant funding to different businesses and different organizations that have simply been shut down as a result of the COVID situation and the pandemic. We're talking here about theaters and museums and really the arts, as well as a lot of those community assets that are so important. This is going to be an opportunity for folks to actually tap into some funding to replace lost revenue that has resulted from the pandemic. So stay tuned for that. Janie's going to touch on it, but this is clearly one of those programs that you're going to get more information as time goes on, as SBA kind of works out the details. It's going to be actually administered through our Office of Disaster Assistance. So it's kind of exciting and interesting, I think. And again, the PPP itself, as Janie will explain, is, I think, going to be much more thoughtfully delivered this time around, and I just think it's important for you guys to know that this stuff is out there, to be talking with your lenders. If you have an existing lending relationship, if you find after the discussion today that you want to pursue a PPP loan, but you don't have a bank, or you don't quite know where to go, I think you're going to find that there are going to be opportunities to get information on how to get matched up with a lender. So I don't want to give away all of what Janie's saying, but my key points are, number one, that this is a significant piece of legislation with some great programs and tools for small businesses. And secondly, that while we don't have all of the information on them, the information is going to be pushed out as it becomes available. So I really would urge or encourage you guys to connect with us through those website opportunities like the sba.gov /. the email blast opportunity that I mentioned. So, hey, with that, why don't I go ahead? I want to introduce Janie Sacco. Janie is my colleague, and she's been doing a tremendous amount of work. Actually, she came on board with us kind of right around the time that we started into the PPP business back in last spring. She's worked through the PPP's first iteration. She's very knowledgeable of the PPP forgiveness process and all of the little idiosyncrasies that go with that. And now she's kind of spearheading our outreach, kind of our technical outreach on these programs. So she's going to be a great resource for you guys going forward. And both Janie and I would be more than pleased to be able to be accessible via email. And what I'll do is I'll put in the chat both Janie and my email addresses. So if you guys, as a result of our conversation today, want to follow up, if you've got any specific questions, I know Janie's fantastic at it, and I'll do my best to be responsive to you as well. So with that, again, thanks, John, and I want to go ahead and turn it over to Janie.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for all attending this training today. And I'm going to go through it not quickly. I want to make sure that the content's delivered okay for you. And certainly, if you have any questions as we go through this, if you can load them into chat, and then maybe at the end we'll try and go through them. If I see some of them, I may be able to answer them as I'm going through. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So this slide deck is a summary of the overview of the key elements for the new 2021 Paycheck Protection Program. And we're going to be talking about the changes in it and the different tax provisions that are included in the legislation and how they impact you, and the focus on the underserved and low income communities and what different facets of that are included in this legislation. And then we're going to talk about where to apply for PPP loans and cover information on the economic injury disaster loan. So advising is key, and that technical assistance piece. And I'm also going to give you some examples of the application documents so you can look at them and be comfortable with them. And in an effort to keep this Zoom call going for me, sometimes I drop off, but I get back in right away. So if you see me go away or freeze up, I'll be back. All right. But I'm going to stop the video and just do this orally for you. Next slide, please. So all of this information is relevant as of today. And this slide deck was prepared by the Washington Small Business Development Center, Steve Burke and me. We jointly did this. So everything is as current as it can be. And I just, we're trying to make sure we keep this fresh. We do encourage you to talk to your CPA or your tax preparer or attorney to make sure that you have a good understanding of how these programs are going to impact your specific business, because this is not in a vacuum of just one product. There are many products and many tools, and they can all impact your business differently. So the whole purpose of this presentation is just to get you comfortable with what's going on right now, and the technical support partners that are out there to assist you, such as the San Juan EDC. Next slide, please. What can you as a small business owner do to get ready? Well, first and foremost, I would like you to have your 2019 tax return. And then what I'd like you to do is prepare side by side for yourself to review a quarterly 2019 and a quarterly 2020 profit and loss statement. So it will help you with your application process. We do want you to take a look at the highest average monthly payroll for your business, whether it was calendar year 2019 or 2020, or a rolling last 12 months. And if you apply for a PPP loan this month, it will be the rolling 12 months will go back to just 2020. But if you apply next month, then it would look like February 2020 to January 2021. So that's what we mean by that rolling 12-month calendar. Other documents that you may need later are copies of your bank account statements that show how money is coming in from these loan products and how they exited your account, third-party payroll records, your W-2 and W-3 forms, tax forms such as a 941, copies of your funds transfers, canceled checks, ACH activity, your state wage reporting documents for unemployment and for labor and industries. And then for the employer, your employer portions of your group insurances, such as health, vision, dental, life and disability, and then your employer paid retirement plans and your state and local taxes. So just think of documenting however you use this money, whether it's PPP money or idle money, doesn't really matter. Just keep good record of it. So for those of you who are second draw appliers for the PPP, you will need to evidence changes in your loss of revenue from 19 to 2020. And for the shuttered venue, some of the other programs, you will need to be able to demonstrate your level of reduced revenue. Next slide, please. So there were 5 major changes in the PPP program. So let's talk about the first draw PPP loan. This is for business entities who did not apply for and receive a PPP loan in 2020. First priority goes to PPP borrowers that are doing it for the first time. And that rolled out this week, starting on Monday. And what we were trying to focus on is getting money into underserved communities or markets. And that underserved community or market includes minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and businesses that are in the low-income areas or underserved markets. That all opened up on Monday. And then on Wednesday, yesterday, it opened up for second-time borrowers or drawers in those same communities. And what everyone must show as a business is that they were in operation on or before February 15th, 2020. The maximum amount of the PPP loan is $2 million. And that also takes into consideration affiliation alliances. So that is your total maximum amount available. And it is for not more than 500 employees per physical location. And that's, again, your first draw. And accommodation and food service businesses that are in the NAICS code 72 can employ up to 500 employees per location. The loan amounts this time around are based on 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. And it is 3.5 times average monthly payroll for those businesses that are in the NAICS code 72 category. The program has been extended to March 31st, 2021, and there is an appropriation of $284.45 billion for the full PPP program. Next slide, please. The next issue is on the second draw. The eligibility is for businesses that have used all of their first PPP funds as of December 31st. And because that is the cutoff, December 31st, 2020 was the cutoff for the first loans covered period. All of your funds should have been expended by that point. Second draw PPP borrowers must document a 25% reduction in gross revenue. And that 25% reduction can be compared either on an annual basis from 2019 to 2020, or comparing any one of the 4 quarters from 2019 to 2020. So you would compare first quarter 19 to first quarter 20, but et cetera, for the year. But again, it only has to be one of those quarters. So look at it annually or look at it quarterly, see which one you comply with. Again, the maximum amount of the loan is $2 million and not more than 300 employees. There are some exceptions to the 300 employee rule, and those are on an off basis, and they are tied to the NAICS 72. And you know what, it says that they can employ 300 per physical location, but the NAICS 72 and some of the media and a few other industries can go up to 500 employees per location. When you get the loan is fully dispersed at one time. There is only one second draw PPP loan allowed per borrower. And again, the loan amounts are based on 2.5 times average monthly payroll or 3.5 times average monthly payroll for accommodation and food service industries in the 72 NAICS code sector. The eligible entities for this loan has changed a little bit, and it is now for-profit businesses, certain nonprofit businesses, including 501c3s, 501c6s, housing cooperatives, veterans organizations, tribal businesses, those businesses who are self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and small business cooperatives. And if you have a tourist bureau, for example, that is now eligible as well. So it really expanded that nonprofit sector this time around for eligibility to borrow. Next slide, please. And as Mark was saying, there is a simplified PPP loan forgiveness, and that goes up to $150,000 or less loans, however you want to look at that, but it's 150 or less. And this is retroactive to the loans that were issued in 2020. So a lot of lenders are holding off now on accepting applications, especially from the borrowers who have loans of 150 or less, because they want you to use the new form and have the convenience of the abbreviated document. And as Mark indicated, the new form will be 1 page, and it includes a description of the number of employees that were retained because of the PPP loans and the estimated total amount of the dollars spent on payroll costs. You do need to still have evidence that at least 60% of the PPP proceeds were used for payroll purposes. Up to 40% of the PPP loans now can, and retroactively, can be used to fund secured business loan, interest expense, rents, including equipment leases, utility costs. And now the program has also been expanded to include property damage costs in certain areas that were impacted by that. supplier costs, workers' protection expenditures, all during the covered period. So for last year, if you spent money on those items and you want to get your 40% evidenced by using those proceeds, whether they were PPP money or money that you had in hand, you can use those expenses for last year's loan. All right. And this is a really important thing because we want you to be able to get to full forgiveness. The other changes related to the use of the PPP funds have allowances for operational expenses, including computing, human resource costs, accounting, supplier costs, so long as you had a contract for goods and services in place, and also for personal protection equipment. And again, a lot of money was spent on that last year. Now you can claim that for last year as part of your PPP use. Property damage that is caused by the civil unrest, again, is allowed as a PPP expense if you were in those areas that was impacted by that. And payroll costs include group insurance, including life insurance, disability, health, vision, and or dental insurance. And then again, it's retroactive to last year. So just claim what you need to claim and make sure that you count everything in there. Borrowers who returned all or a part of their PPP loan proceeds may apply for a second draw PPP loan for up to the $2 million maximum amount. And just a general statement is that PPP borrowers are required to retain all relevant records related to employment for 4 years and other records for 3 years. And that is a slight change over last year's record retention requirements. Next slide, please. Additional uses of the PPP for this year that have come out are farmers and ranchers who operate as sole proprietorships, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals may utilize their gross income from their 2019 Schedule F form, so long as they were in business on February 15th, 2020, to calculate their PPP loan amount. And farm credit institutions can make PPP loans now, which is a change from last year. So that is a definite benefit in helping farmers and ranchers in particular be able to be more self-sustaining with this PPP loan. The definition of a seasonal employer has changed slightly to a business that operates for not more than 7 months a year, or who earns no more than 1/3 of its receipts in any 6 months in the prior calendar year. So that is a very a different description about a seasonal employer as compared to the more loosely defined seasonal employer last year. Housing cooperatives are also eligible. FCC license holders and newspapers with more than one physical location and no more than 500 employees per location are eligible. And as I said earlier, destination marketing organizations are eligible, depending upon their receipt and funds that they receive from lobbying activities and other government-related receipts. So the destination marketing organizations are tourist bureaus, typically. That's a good example of one. Next slide, please. One of the nice changes to come out of this legislation for business owners, again, retroactively, is that the economic injury disaster loan advance, that up to $10,000 grant, from the Office of Disaster Assistance is no longer deducted from the PPP loan forgiveness. You don't have to put that in there anymore. So the legislation repealed this deduction, and that's why it's retroactive. So if your PPP loan has already been forgiven, the SBA is going to provide what's called a reconciliation payment to your lender on your loan to pay down the outstanding balance of your PPP loan as it relates to the idle advance that wasn't forgiven. So the idle advance is a forgivable loan. It is not income tax reportable as a result of this legislation. And the PPP loan is not tax reportable as a result of this legislation. So what they're doing here is they are eliminating the impact of that idle advance on your PPP loan that ended up having an outstanding balance last year if it was forgiven. So your loan, your PPP loan with an outstanding balance as it relates to that idle advance from last year will be paid down to zero. Your lender will be notifying you when that occurs. Yeah, let's see. The new legislation establishes that PPP borrowers who receive the idle advance should be made whole. So that's the wording that's in the document. But that's a good thing for all of you. Next slide, please. Tax provision expenses are now forgivable. They are now tax deductions on your year-end reporting. Well, first of all, the idle advance, the PPP loan, and if you had an existing SBA loan, either 7A guaranteed or the 504 portion of your SBA 504 loan, if you received payments on those types of loans, that is not taxable income for 2020 or 2021. All right, so that's a good thing. The other issue is that last year, if you had used money on your PPP loan and you had your expenses, there was an issue about that not being allowed to be deducted. With this legislation, you can now expense off all of the expenses that you used to pay from your PPP loan. So that's a good thing too, and that was a point of contention. So these are very positive impact changes for tax reporting in 2020 and 2021. Next slide, please. The other change for the PPP program includes some of the following items. One is last year, depending on when you received your loan, you either had a mandatory covered period of 8 weeks or 24 weeks. And when the 24-week one was implemented, those of you who had originally an 8-week covered period could then choose between having an 8-week or a 24-week covered period. Now you have the opportunity to choose any number of weeks during that 8 and 24-week period for your covered period. So if you spend all of your PPP money this time around in 15 weeks, you can call your covered period for a 15-week period and then apply for forgiveness. Again, that is a really important aspect, especially for your FTE compliance issues. So that was a very positive change. And again, you have the opportunity to make a determination whether you want to use 2019 or 2020's average monthly payroll in order for that to apply. Accommodation and food service businesses, again with that 72 NAICS code, can have a 3.5 times multiplier of their average payroll. Seasonal employers can determine their amount based on any 12-week period between February 15th, 2019 and February 15th, 2020. Last year, it was a little bit more restricted window. So again, this is a benefit for those of you who may be in a seasonal business. And they expanded the number of employees per location. And one thing that you are going to have to do for all PPP loans is that you're going to submit certification attesting to the fact that you maintained your employee in wages or salaries at least 75% of their pre-COVID rates, and that you maintain your FTE. So this is a rule, those rules really have not been modified. Next slide, please. The SBA Administrator was required by the legislation to really address the barriers to access to capital for underserved communities. So as a result of that, there was $15 billion set aside for PPP loans to be issued by community financial institutions. And community financial institutions are defined as certified development financial institutions, CDCs, community development corporations, the intermediaries that were doing loans of 50,000 or less, and minority depository institutions known as MDIs. There is also a $15 billion set aside for loans to be issued by other certain small business depository institutions. They are small depository institutions at this point are being defined as those with one, yes? They are defined as being institutions with 1 billion or less in assets. And then there was a set aside for $35 billion for first-time borrowers. And again, those are going on right now. And were happening this week. My screen went away.
Yeah, everything just sort of rebooted.
Okay.
Spencer,
I'm going to get my paper
recording.
going.
Trying to get the screen sharing back up and running.
I'm going to get my paper one and keep going. Okay, so the other thing we have, again, that set aside for the 35 billion for first-time borrowers, 15 billion is of which is for small borrowers that have 10 or fewer employees. 25 billion was set aside for second draw loans for smaller borrowers with 10 or fewer employees, or loans with less than $250,000 in low income areas. Minority business development companies had a set aside, and micro lenders had a set aside as well. In regard to the debt relief, as I mentioned earlier, for those with existing 7A, 504, the SBA portion, and micro loans, yeah, we're on to the next slide, 14. The SBA will begin paying loan payments for those businesses that have those loans in February next month. And those payments are limited to $9,000 a month. So if you are a borrower that has a payment of more than $9,000 per month, it is your responsibility to pay the difference. There are certain businesses in underserved areas that may actually receive more than 3 months of payments, again, starting in February. And the SBA Administrator has a special procedure for determining if certain small business debtors are eligible for the PPP loan if they have a bankruptcy filing. It does require court approval for these debtors. Next slide, please. We're going to be talking about the shuttered venue operators here. And it was really interesting today. We were on a 15-minute webinar, and we did receive a little bit of information in regard to what's coming out. And what I want you to do is, as Mark indicated, sign up for updates. But what I'd really like you to do is to also every once in a while take a peek at the SBA website. And if you are a shuttered venue operator in that classification, what I would like you to do is take a look at the sba.gov coronavirus relief website for updates. And they're going to be publishing the information there. And what you might want to do as a precursor, if you fall into that category, is start breaking down your 2019 year and your 2020 year on a monthly basis, and take a look at only those months when you were in, would operate through the full month. So, for example, if you started your business in a partial month in the year, you would exclude that. We only want the full years. So when the program rolls out, those of you who are live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts operators, museum operators, motion picture operators, and talent representatives who demonstrate a revenue reduction, you will be queued up for processing in the following manner. For those of you who had a 90% or more documentable revenue loss, you will be given a priority for processing for the grant program the first 14 days. If you had a minimum 70% revenue reduction up to 98.999%, you will be in the second set of 14 days for priority. And then after the first 28 days, the grant will be awarded to venues with documented revenue reductions of less than 70%. So the good news is the initial grant can be up to $10 million with a supplemental second grant that is 50%, no more than 50% of the first one. So some venues may be able to obtain up to $15 million if need be, based on that formula. And there is a set aside for entities with up to 50 full-time employees. So we're still waiting for all of the procedures to roll out on this program, but we do have that additional information for you today as of that session. Next slide, please. The other part of the program related to the economic injury disaster loan is the advance program and the EIDL grants. So, you know, the emergency grant, it's the same thing essentially, but it has two different names in the media. And so the bottom line here is that there was a whole pool of businesses that applied for the economic injury disaster loan. And some of those applicants received $1,000 and some of them received up to $10,000. So what's going to happen is that the Office of Disaster Assistance is going to set up procedures to go back and take a look at the applicants who did not receive that full $10,000 and set up a protocol to distribute the funds. We do not know what those procedures and the protocols are going to be, but we understand that the small business owners who are in application from last year are going to get the first priority. So there has been a $20 million allocation for funding those grants. And this particular funding extends through December 31st, 2021, or until the funds have been fully utilized. And they're really trying to target low-income communities first for these funds. So that, again, the low-income communities will be defined as part of this process. Next slide, please. The other thing that came out of this is the Employee Retention Tax Credit. That is through the IRS. And although I'm going to give you a few of the highlights here, what I really want you to do is work with your tax preparer, your CPA, because this is an IRS program and there are nuances to it that we want you to utilize and be able to meet successfully, but do it properly. And the bottom line to all of this is that the employee retention tax credit last year was up to 50% of qualified wages. With this legislation, it goes up to 70% of qualified wages. And it does require that you evidence a revenue decline of 20% or more from 2019 to 2020. It establishes a credit limit of $10,000 per employee per quarter, whereas last year it was $10,000 per employee per year. So it's shifted from $10,000 to $40,000 with this legislation. And it allows businesses with the 500 or fewer employees to advance the credit based on wages paid in the same quarter in the previous year. So again, this is a complex tax credit. We want you to do it properly. Please utilize your professional resources in that venue to tap into that. It can be a good option for those businesses who cannot apply for a new PPP loan. There are a few that don't qualify for the new PPP, and you can use the ERTC in conjunction with a PPP loan too. So anyway, a lot of flexibility there with this product. Just make sure you use it properly. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of information about community financial institutions. Again, they're CDFIs, they're CDCs, they're microlenders, and they're minority depository institutions. They rolled out on Monday, and we have resources lists to help you with that. I can share that with John after we are done with the presentation. The PPP program, as Mark indicated, opens up to small lenders. Those small lenders are considered to have $1 billion or less in assets. I think I've said that like 3 times now, but they're rolling out tomorrow. And then on January 19th, it opens up to all lenders who may either be banks, credit unions, farm credit institutions, or fintechs. So it's coming for everyone fairly soon in terms of accessibility to their particular financial institution. One thing I do want to point out is that if you are struggling to find a lender Then we have on the SBA website a lender match function. And what you do is you go in and you put your information in, and lenders will contact you to see if you want to work with them for a PPP loan application. It's a very good product, and it is, again, on the SBA website, and we have the link later on in this slide deck. And the key here is for all first or second draw PPP loans, you do have to work with an SBA lender authorized to do PPP loans. So you just keep that in mind. And that's why not all lenders are authorized, but many are, because we had slightly under 1,900 SBA guaranteed lenders prior to the PPP, and it went up to over 5,500 with the PPP product. So you should be able to find someone to help you get through a PPP application. Next slide, please. The SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Update, and this is for the actual loan. This product is a term loan. It has a maturity of 30 years. There are no payments through on the loan until the 12th month from the loan date. You can use those proceeds for any working capital purpose. And if you are a for-profit business, your interest rate is fixed at 3.75 for the life of the loan. If you're a nonprofit business, it is fixed at 2.75 for the life of the loan. This product has been extended through the end of this year or until the funds are no longer available, and there's no prepayment penalty on it. You can have both an economic injury disaster loan and a PPP loan. The only caveat there, or thing you need to know, is that you don't want to mix the funds for the same expense in the same period. So if you have a payroll, you either want to fund it with the PPP money or you want to fund it with the economic injury disaster loan money, but do not combine them for that single period. You can apply for an economic injury disaster loan at covid19relief.sba.gov, or you can just go into sba.gov/disaster-assistance, and the link will come up as well. So we have multiple ways for you to get in there. If you have an existing idle loan that is unfunded and you want to check on it, you can call 800-659-2955 to check on its status. What we want you to do, though, after you have someone answer the phone, is to ask for a tier 2 lender, and they will be able to give you a little bit more assistance. If you have had your idle loan denied or declined, then you can request a reconsideration of that decline. And you go through PDC recons at sba.gov. You also use PDC recons at sba.gov if you have fully utilized your idle proceeds and you want an increase. When you send in the email, what I want you to do in the subject line is put in either your application number or your loan number as applicable, and then put in their reconsideration for a decline or a loan increase, whatever it happens to be. That way, when the employees that are taking the information off the website are looking at it, they can route it to the appropriate area. Some things for a reconsideration or an increase you may want to include is an SBA form 3501 and a statement of liabilities document and an updated 4506T form. You can get all of those off the forms from the websites and sba.gov, and go to forms and then pull them up. So they're very accessible. And the one thing with the economic injury disaster loan that I just want to get out there is, please make sure all of your information is accurate. What I'm encouraging people to do is to take a screenshot of every data entry page before they go to the next one so they can see what they put in the application. And then when you get to that last page and you're putting in your information for your bank account number, check with your financial institution first in regard to the routing number, because some institutions have a routing number that is different than the one on your check for electronic transfers. So if you have an error in your account number, I'm going to tell you it will slow your ability to get your loan down by several months at this point. So please make sure that your information in your application is accurate. Next slide, please. So now we're coming toward the end of the presentation, but I think it's one of the more important parts because we're going to walk you through the actual forms. And I've put together some samples for you. And when we're looking at the PPP loan, first draw SBA form 2483, it has a revision date of January 8th, 2021. Excuse me. What I want you to look at here is that this form allows you to select your entity type. And as you're going through this form, you're putting in your trade name, you're putting in the year that your business was established, your business's legal entity name, your NAICS code, which you can obtain from your tax return. And this is really important because if you don't put your NAICS code in, your lender will have to make a determination. They cannot process your request in their data entry system to get your loan authorization number unless they put your NAICS code in. All right. And then you do have to select the number of employees that you have, put in your physical business address, your business tax identification number, as it has been reported on your tax return. So it will either be an EIN, your employer identification number, or your social security number in some cases for some business types. They want to have your contact information, which includes the business phone, the primary contact, and the email address. And what I have in here is the average monthly payroll. In this example, I just put $5,000 in there, but I multiplied it by 2.5 times for the loan amount to be $12,500. And what I want you to see is that if you had an economic injury disaster loan last year that funded prior to April 3rd, 2020, that was issued in between January 1, 2020 and April 3rd, 2020, you do need to include that in here as part of your loan amount so that it is paid in full. And then your number of employees is full-time equivalent. What I want to point out on the employee number is that this program allows for either one of two options for the treatment of your part-time employees. You can either treat them all as 1/2 employee, or you can take their actual number of hours and divide it by a 40-hour work week. So those are your two options. And it is that part is at your discretion, in addition to all of your full-time employees. The purpose of the loan, what I'm encouraging people to do is to select all boxes that could apply to you. The only one that may not is the covered property damage, but it gives you the most flexibility to support your use of the PPP money, especially when you go to forgiveness. So check as many as you think will be applicable for your business type. Next slide, please. We're going to go over the the bottom of the page 1. And what I want to point out here is that you do have to list the 20% or more owners of the business. If you're a nonprofit entity, then what I would encourage you to do there is put down the names and information for those individuals who are authorized to indebt your nonprofit organization per the organization documents. And you may use the business address of the nonprofit or the personal address of the person who is authorized to sign. The other thing I want to point out when you're going through the questions is I know it sounds simple, you do need to read them, but the tricky part here is some of them are no for eligibility and one of them is yes. So just please make sure you go through and read each question and answer it as truthfully based on your situation. The other thing I want to point out that questions 5 and 6 do require you to initial your response. And when you get down to 8 and 9, if you answer yes to a franchise, you do need on line 9 to put in the SBA franchise identifier code. So if you need help with that code, please contact us at the district office and we will help you. Next slide, please. We're going to get into the certifications, attestations, and representations on page 2 of the document. And I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but what it does cover are the things that are relevant to your business for eligibility. So you're certifying that you have read all of these certifications, authorizations, representations, and that they are true and accurate for your business. So if you have any questions once you read through these, again, please contact us and we'd be more than happy to deal with each one of these things individually. And it has to do with the use of the proceeds, what industry you're in, that you're engaged in legal activity. It addresses your economic injury disaster loan and a few other things. So basically, just read through it and make sure it is true and correct. Next slide, please. At the bottom of page 2, where you're dealing with those certifications, you do have to go through and initial each one of the boxes. And again, it's addressing that the business was in operation, that you, as a result of economic uncertainty, feel that this loan request is necessary to support your operations, and the funds will be used for acceptable and allowed purposes. If you are a shuttered venue operator, you do have to attest that the applicant has not and will not receive a shuttered venue operator grant from the SBA, because you may only access either the PPP loan or the shuttered grant venue operator grant. You cannot have both. And then there's a couple other representations there, but those, again, read through them, make sure that you are in compliance with them. At the bottom of page 2, you do have to sign and date and put your title on, things like that, but that's pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. The third page of the form is an optional demographic page. And we're trying to capture this information at the time of application. And the definition of a principal on number 3 defines who should be filling out this particular form. If you have more than one owner that complies, then you would put more than one of these in for each individual. So you could have 2, 3, whatever, however many apply for the definition in number 3. So the data we're trying to collect from a demographic standpoint is your veteran status, your gender, your race, and your ethnicity. So you do have the option of not disclosing any of that information, but we really wish that you would complete this form and provide the information so that the SBA can demonstrate the demographic data as to who are the owners are that are getting loans under the PPP program. Next slide, please. We are now moving along to a sample of a completed PPP second draw SBA form. The second draw forms are designated as a form number 2483SD. And the top looks fairly similar to the first draw form. However, as you go through and get down to the bottom of the first section, what you see is you do need to load in the SBA loan number for your first PPP loan. And for qualification purposes, you have to evidence a 25% revenue reduction from 2019 to 2020. So in this section, you're evidencing where that 25% revenue reduction occurred. If it was an annual comparison, you're going to put just 2020 and 2019 in the reference quarter and do the total gross receipts for 2020 as compared to 2019. You also have the option of picking any one of the 4 quarters. If your business originated between January 1 and February 15th, 2020, you will use that quarter and compare it to any of the other 3 quarters in 2020 to evidence the 25% minimum revenue reduction for qualification purposes. If your loan amount is $150,000 or less, you don't need to evidence this with paperwork at the time of application. You will do that at the time of forgiveness. But those of you with loans above $150,000 will have to evidence this 25% reduction at the time you apply for your PPP loan. Next slide, please. Again, you do need to list each 20% or more owner. In this sample, I just put 1 owner. But again, if you have a nonprofit, please indicate the people who are authorized to sign on behalf of your nonprofit entity. Please go through, answer the questions, yes or no, as applicable. Again, on lines 4 and 5, you do have to initial that. And the one that has to be a yes is number 6, because that is the principal place of residence for all employees included in the applicant's payroll calculation is the United States. So that has to be yes, or it is not eligible. Again, you have the franchise issue on line 7 and the franchise code on line 8. So please indicate that if applicable. Next slide, please. The process for your representations and authorizations and all of that, are changing a little bit on this one. What you are certifying is a lot of the same information. But again, it is a little bit, there is some expansion on this one. So please read through all of that, make sure you're complying. And then let's go to the next slide, because that starts where the majority of the changes are for the second draw. Have to look here. Okay, so the Form 2483 SD actually has 3 pages. So the things that you have to authorize an initial are expanded, and they deal specifically with this being a second draw. So again, what I want you to do is read through all of them. The one that's in there that's a repetitive for sure is that the applicant has not and will not receive a shuttered venue operator grant from the SBA. But there are also other statements that are slightly different than the first draw form. So when you're going through this, just make sure that you read through them, initial all of them. And then this document requires a signature again of the owner of the business on the 3rd page. Next slide, please. And you can see on this page, where you would sign, put in your name, your date, and your title. If you have an institution that you're applying through that does these forms electronically, they will do obviously an electronic signature. So the financial institutions are allowed to create an electronic application document as long as it incorporates the information that's contained in the one on the SBA website. It may be a little bit different format, but it does contain all the same information. Next slide, please. What I do want to just indicate is I did not on this second draw form, I'm sorry, second draw application form, I did not put in the optional demographic data, but there is a page for it in the application. So again, I just didn't want to be repetitive, but I do want you to know that it is there as well. So where can you go to get additional information and support for doing these programs and applying for these loans? There is a technical assistance support for non-English speakers and underserved communities on the State of Washington Department of Commerce website. And the link is here, commerce.wa.gov/serving communities/technical assistance from trusted community messengers. / So that is a good resource. There is one-on-one counseling and advising at the Small Business Development Centers. You can contact them by either going to Washington at WSBDC.org, or you can call them at 833-492-7232, and you will be aligned with an advisor that is in your geographic footprint. You also can go to the SBA.gov website. And the thing that I find most valuable on the website for those of you that have English as a second language is there is a translate button in the upper right-hand corner of the main page of the website. And when you click on that, you have the opportunity to select 108 different languages outside of English to convert the website to. It's a very good tool. And then earlier we mentioned the lender match. That is at sba.gov/funding-programs/loans/lender match. So go in there and take a look at that. If you need help locating a lender, the Treasury website also has information on the PPP program and the different rules. So you can go to home.treasury.gov and there's a coronavirus banner there. And then for the employee retention tax credit, please go to the IRS website indicated here in the link. And for specific questions about the PPP program and the frequently asked questions, they are available on the sba.gov website, and you can go to sba.gov/PPP, or you can put in sba.gov/paycheck protection. It'll all get you to the same website address. Next slide, please. So upcoming training and webinars, we have them going on for through middle of March, and we're doing quite a few, and it's all good information to get out there to the community. So we are going to have on January 15th another update on the COVID-19 relief and PPP application package, very similar to this one today. And then on the 22nd, we're going to do an updated program on the PPP loan forgiveness, hopefully with instructions. We're hoping that the documents will come out so that we can provide some samples for you. There are additional PPP webinars planned every Friday at 10 a.m. through March. And those webinars can be found at the WSBDC, the Washington Small Business Development Center, ecenterdirect.com/events. The training today on the Shuttered Venue Grant Program, it was a 15-minute presentation, but it gave us some good nuggets to share with you today. So that one has transpired already. And there are several other presentations coming up that are going to be specific for the different organizations in the community. So check with the San Juan EDC for their upcoming events and participation. John participated in the WIDA one this morning, and we're going to continue doing that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. into March. So that's a great program to participate into for information. Next slide, please. We're almost done. What I would like to point out here is that the Washington Small Business Development Center, Steve Burke and I, again, we put this presentation together. Steve is the managing advisor at the Washington Small Business Development Center. There are centers located throughout the state of Washington, and they do a very good job of outreach and counseling, one-on-one advising to existing small businesses, and they are there to help you. And you have their contact information on this slide. Next slide, please. And I think we're almost at the last one. Certainly, we're going to open this up for Q&A, and you can email Mark at mark.costello@sba.gov. You can email me at janie.sacco@sba.gov. We also have our 206-553-7310 line. That is the line to the Seattle District Office. I do want to let you know that we are not in the office due to the COVID-19. And we are working from home, but we can check the 7310 number for messages. So please leave a message. We will try and get back to you the same day. Or if it's later in the day when you're leaving the message, it may be the following day, but we really try and get back to you timely. For the support services of the Small Business Development Center, again, you can see the email address and the phone number there. And a picture of Steve Burke, who is typically my presenting partner on events like this, but he had a conflict today. So thank you very much for attending, and I really appreciate you doing that. And let's open it up for Q&A, and we'll get it back to John.
Wow. Well, we promised everybody a lot of good information, and this is this was a good one. I've been on like probably 3 or 4 of these now, and it's amazing how just in the last week the information has progressed, and just gotten more detailed. Every day. Even going to multiple presentations a day on where the topics all cross over. So thank you, Janie. I know this is it's a lot to unleash in almost an hour and a half. We've got a few minutes for questions from all you guys. If you have questions, throw them in the chat, or I think it's winnowed down a little bit. I can go ahead and unmute folks if you use the raise hand feature, or chat me and say, question. And there's one in the chat. Janie, you're able to see the chat questions, right?
Yes. It came and went. And
okay.
they,
this was Tony. Will most
I'm gonna
financial
open up my chat. Hang on just a second.
No, it's okay. This was will most financial institutions be providing applications on their websites through a portal? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say probably.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most of the larger institutions and the small regional financial institutions will be doing that. I think the smaller financial institutions that maybe, 1 to 5 branches, they may be doing it manually, but just use their tools. That's what I'm going to say. And make sure that you have the ability to scan your documents in that they're requesting as part of your application for this loan.
Right. And we have in the office done a breakdown on some local banks and a couple of online lenders, and basically posted their landing pages. I don't have the exact address, but if you go to our news page, which I'm throwing into the chat there, you'll be able to spot it pretty quickly. It's our January 2021 list of PPP participating lenders, and we're going to keep updating that as we get more information. I just flipped through it today because I saw that everybody's opening up tomorrow and Monday, depending on if they have $1 billion or less in assets. And it looks like all those landing pages are still holding. Blue Vine looks like they're taking already starting to take applications if you need to go to an online lender. Cabbage still sounds like they're thinking about it. And, obviously we keep encouraging everybody to try to first work with their business lender, if it's Heritage or Islanders Banner or Key Bank, to make sure they're in touch with them. And all of the regulars have their landing pages up and, with basic information and what you need to know, and we'll get it up and running as soon as possible. So it feels a lot more put together than, back in April when we all did this for the very first time. So. Any more other questions? Or did you get all of the answer? You guys know everything now? Let's see. I'm gonna unmute everybody just in case there's anybody that either can't find the raise hand or doesn't want to use the chat.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Peter. How are you?
Hey. But thanks. Very, very good presentation.
Sure, of course.
I have a
there's a lot of
question.
fun. Yeah.
Can we anticipate the second round of PPP funding will also be forgivable if it's under 150 grand?
Yes, I think that they're sticking with the 150 or less. The legislation, from what I saw that was enacted, actually said under 150, but I think it's been adapted or changed a little bit to have loans of 150 or less. And keep in mind, the majority of the loans, well over 80% of all of the PPP loans issued in the first go round in 2020, over 80% of them were 150,000 or less. The average loan size was $101,000. So this is a real boon for the financial institutions to process these forgiveness applications and have it be less stressful for their borrowers to do so. So it's really a good thing all the way around. And it is retroactive to 2020 applications as well as this year's.
Thank you.
Janie, there was one on the call either this morning or or at noon, where we were talking about especially when it comes to sole props and independent contractors, how they calculate their income for PPP, and it sort of came down to what happens on line 31 of your Schedule C. If you want to tackle that one, because there's a lot of folks that will fall into that category here,
Yeah.
and you know.
Sure. So here's the little bit of a dilemma, and I'm just going to say it like that, is that normally the PPP loan product is really, the loan amount is calculated based on the average monthly payroll. And again, you can choose 2019, 2020, or the rolling 12 months. Okay. The little problem that comes up is that if you are a Schedule C filer, and that's how you report your taxable income, if line 31 is negative, you are not eligible for a PPP loan as the owner of the business. And what we see, and I'm going to tell you, I have 30 years of small business lending experience behind me before I joined the SBA here in May of 2020. Tax preparers want to reduce your taxable income. And so if you operate at home, they have an adjustment, a negative adjustment between line 29 and line 31 that is specifically for your use of home. And oftentimes they will try and wipe out your entire operating profit or reduce it significantly by taking that adjustment. So I'm not your CPA and I'm not your tax preparer. But what I am going to say is that for this product, this PPP loan, you do have to have a positive number on line 31 in order for you as a sole proprietor to be eligible to apply. And there are some Schedule C filers who have employees. So for those of you who have employees, you can use the wage number on there plus your compensation as indicated on line 1 and do the numbers to come up with your average monthly payroll and your loan amount. All right. So you might want to talk to your CPA before you get a little heavy-handed with your operating profit on line 31 for 2020.
So for a sole proprietor, and I'm just trying to come up with a number that would help math-wise. Say your line 31, your net income ends up being, without having other employees, ends up being $120. So if you divide that by
12.
12, and then multiply that by 2.5, then you have about a $34 PPP
Right.
loan, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was an article in the New York Times about a week ago, which was, which highlighted a lot of folks.
Somebody ended up with $1, right?
Yeah, a loan for $1.
Right. It's almost not even worth doing the paperwork.
Yeah.
I would give them the $1.
Yeah.
But I understand, and that's really frustrating, but that is the function of the math. The other thing that came up in that noon presentation was residency status and eligibility. And the rules did change a little bit from in the SOPs on October 1st, 2020. The new SOP, Standard Operating Procedures, came out, and it defined the eligible borrowers as either a U.S. citizen or a person who has legal permanent resident status in the U.S. Those are the only two categories of business owners who are eligible to apply for any SBA program, whether it's the economic injury disaster loan, or it is a PPP loan, or it's a regular 7A product.
So, just chasing this rabbit hole a little bit more, and
Yeah.
I know we're just past 3:30, but maybe if you got a couple more minutes.
I'm fine.
With, so say a sole prop, isn't going to be able to get PPP because there's, no money in their tax return on that. The assumption is they could probably go for the EIDL grant, depending on how this low income community designation works out, if it's based on census tracts per address or census tract average per zip code, or how this is all going to work. So
Yeah. And I'm just going to say that, and I'm not sure if your audience knows this or not, but there were over 15 million economic injury disaster loan applications last year. And that was probably through about August. So from the end of March to about August, the number was 15 million. It is in all likelihood is higher. Now, there were some people that applied twice, 3 times, 4 times because they weren't getting a response. They were really worried and desperate, and so there's some duplication in there in those numbers. However, out of that 15 million, less than 4 million loans were really approved. So there is a huge population of those applications that was cycling through for reconsideration of the loan decline. And then as the year went on, and the people that received the economic injury disaster loan proceeds, the actual loan, used up all of their money because the loan amounts were limited to a maximum of $150,000. When they used all that up, then they went into reconsideration to apply for an increase. So you have this tremendous number of people that were in the reconsideration process and still are. And so now, because the program has been extended, it expired originally on 12/31/2020, but it's been extended through the end of this year, as I indicated. So now people can still apply. So what am I trying to get to here with the economic injury loan advance, that grant, is that there were a whole lot of people that were in the application process in 2020 that did not get the grant because the funds ran out, I think about the third week of July. Pretty sure it was right in there. So I think what's going to happen is that the Office of Disaster Assistance is going to go back through all the applications that were in 2020 and try and make as many of those small businesses whole to receive the $10,000 or the difference, in their application until those funds run out. But they're going to have a focus on what we've been told, the low income community will get the first opportunity at that money. So we don't know how long the money will hold out. We don't know what the procedures are. I don't want to give you bad information and say, oh yeah, you're all going to get it, because that's not going to happen, right? So let's just kind of stay the course and wait for the Office of Disaster Assistance to redefine that and get good information out to all of us so that we know what we're dealing with.
that's all we can hope for.
Yeah.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, we will wrap this up. And like I said, in the chat, this recording and the presentation deck will be available at the link where you found this meeting in the first place on our news page on sanjuansedc.org. Hopefully later today or first thing tomorrow. We invite you to reach out to us at the EDC on info@sanjuansedc.org. You can reach Janie through her email address, which is at the end of the slide deck. You'll all be able to get your hands on in a few minutes here. And you know, as always, we're here at the EDC to make sure you have as many solutions in front of you as we can possibly gin up. Don't forget there's also unemployment that's been rapidly shifting with the passage of the Stimulus Act, and we've been posting about that a lot on our Facebook page and certainly in our newsletter and news feed as well. So, you know, please make sure you're using our resources or SBA's resources to make sure that you're aware and up to date on all of the all of the evolving changes through these bills that are hopefully going to provide some relief to all of the businesses in our county. I cannot thank Janie and Mark enough for being great sports and coming here and doing one of these for all of us. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm glad you all got your power back too. It was a pretty big blow right through. That was a pretty big windstorm coming through with the water and everything. So
Yeah, that's
That
pretty
was
amazing.
nothing. After 35 years, I've been here through one. So, hey, you guys,
Yeah,
thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And
Well, I'm a Washingtonian from birth, so believe me, I know the vagaries of our weather.
Yeah, you've seen
Yeah.
But I
stuff.
love the rain because it makes everything green. So, you know.
it's beautiful weather. It's the best. And yeah, I'm with the American Legion. We have to do a lot of things here for the PPP and stuff. So thank you very much for your information. It was great.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And please, if you have any questions or whatever as you're going through things, just send me an email. I try and get
will.
back to everybody the same day. All right.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you. I
welcome.
will.
All right. You all have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I saw somebody just joined. I'm going to post the record of this on our news site as well and put the slide deck up there. Hey, Janice. But we're just wrapping up here, but this will be available on our website hopefully by the end of the day today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all soon.